Look who's back in the room with us. I know, it's been a long, long time. I have been so in my head about doing the next Circle of Hell, primarily because it's quite a short video, and I thought, people are used to my longer videos, but you know what, I'm going to pull this out as much as possible, because our latest Circle of Hell is brief, but also juicy, in a really gross way. So when you think of gluttony, what do you think about? For most of us, food comes to mind. You know, when we use the term in our vernacular, it's often food-based. So if we were to imagine a circle of hell dedicated to gluttony, most of us would imagine these like swollen-bellied monsters gorging their faces until they're physically sick. But interestingly, that's not Dante's gluttony, and we shall see why. It was the third circle, where it reigns eternally, icily, and implacably. Weight and direction are invariable. Great hailstones, muddy water, mixed with snow, fall through the darkened air without respite. They rot the ground they fall on, and it stinks. I will admit I'm not exactly the biggest fan of this translation, but there we go. So this third circle of hell, gluttony, is this realm of icy mud, and the gluttons are punished by being forced to lie face down in this gross icy mud whilst being pelted perpetually with rain and hail. The image here is meant to be like they are trawling in the ground like pigs for all eternity in this foul-smelling sludge. And through the mud and the ice and the rain, they are left blind and completely unfulfilled. The nature of the punishment of gluttony in hell is juxtaposed with the action of gluttony on earth. He who practices gluttony on earth can never be appeased, regardless of the amount of material possessions that he owns. A glutton is selfish, greedy, and constantly wanting for more. Now, although it's a brief section, there are two figures of note in this section. The first is Cerberus, or Cerberus, the three-headed dog that you will recognise from Greek mythology, and Ciacco. So the Cerberus section is very brief. Cerberus, whom Dante describes as the, quote, great dragon, bares his teeth at Dante. But even Cerberus, this great howling monster, is not immune from the climate in which he stands. The beast is described as shivering in the cold. He growls and snarls at Virgil and Dante, but Virgil bends over, gathers mud in his hands, and then throws them into Cerberus's filthy muzzles. Now, it's incredibly brief, so why is Cerberus even there in the first place? It's likely because he, with his 3 heads and thus 3 mouths, is symbolically representative of gluttony. He is the embodiment of a gluttonous creature. But it's never really gone into more depth than that incident. But before we get into more details about Dante's gluttony, I'd like to take a moment to thank today's sponsor, which is Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one website platform empowering individuals to create their online web presence or launch their passion projects. Combining 2 decades of industry-leading design expertise with cutting-edge AI technology to unlock your strongest creative potential, Squarespace's design intelligence empowers anyone to build a beautiful website tailored to their unique needs and craft a bespoke digital identity to use across their entire online presence. I'm currently in the process of completely revamping my whole website to reflect all the new projects that I'm launching in the new year and working on in different ways. And I can just do that so easily with Squarespace. I don't have to overthink it. I don't have to code anything. I can change it to reflect how I want it and just revamp. It's so fun. I actually really enjoy the process of rebranding with Squarespace. And you can run your whole business easily on Squarespace as a one-platform solution, from receiving payments for products that you sell to donations from people who just like your content. And customers can pay with popular payment methods from Klarna to Apple Pay, Afterpay, and ClearPay. Squarespace also has activity scheduling facilities, which allows customers to book appointments with you if you're a coach or brick and mortar business, and allows you to engage with your customers through email campaigns, which are super simple to set up thanks to their email templates. So if you want to expand your business or just build a beautiful website for your blogging leisure, go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and then when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Lady of the Library to save 10% of your first purchase of a website or domain. The second figure that we're going to talk about here is Ciacco, a Florentine native who has no historical standing. It would seem that this character is entirely fictional and based on no one in particular. His name most likely comes from a derogatory reference to hog or pig in Florentine dialect. Ciacco has lost the good of the intellect because of his gluttony. He wanted to be remembered admirably by those on earth and was fixated on maintaining his stature. Naturally, his efforts perpetuated him into a state of decline, and hence he ends up here. Now, the reason Ciacco is not really a historical figure is because he isn't actually the main character of the realm of hell, in this realm anyway, though that's not really obvious, you have to read into it. You see, through Ciacco's narrative, we find who the real protagonist of the third circle of hell is. And the real figure is Florence, the city itself. Ciacco describes Florence as, quote, your city, one so full of envy that its sack has always spilled. The literal gluttony that you and I imagine when we think of it, these creatures bursting at the seams, that is of little interest to Dante. We see Cerberus devouring mud, but that's it. The gluttony that Dante is interested in is more metaphorical. It's the unsatiated desire for wealth and power which sits at the heart of the factional politics that divides and destroys his beloved city. So Florence is treated and spoken of as an organism throughout Dante's work, and we see its personification here. It's a figure full of envy spilling out, like it's vomiting out its wealth. Now, notably in this section, Dante is actually combining sins. Florence is a hub of glutton, but also envy and pride. And in this combination of sins, we see that Dante creates a distinction between sinful acts, vices, and the sins themselves. So the Ciacco figure here kind of serves as a prophet for this realm, for Dante, though he is telling him things, the fictional Dante, which have already happened to the real poet. Fictional Dante is undergoing this catabasis, as it were, in 1300, but the events that Ciacco relays to the fictional Dante doesn't happen until 1302, but Dante the poet is writing this poem in 1308. So the fictional Dante asks Ciacco 3 questions about Florence. 1. What end awaits the citizens of this divided city? 2. Is any just man there? And 3. The reason why it has been assailed by so much schism. Through Ciacco's prophecy, poet Dante brings in the protagonists of the political environment of Florence, but obviously not so on the nose. We're referring to the black and white Guelphs. Instead, he calls them the White Party, i.e. the pro-imperial party, and the Black Party, the pro-papal party, and Boniface VIII. Now, I detailed the distinction of this faction in the first video, but I'll re-explain it here for those who want their memories jogged. If not, feel free to skip the section. So the Guelphs and the Ghibellines were groups in medieval Italy who backed the Pope and the Holy Roman Empire between the 12th and the 13th centuries. But the origins of their rivalry date way back further, into the investiture controversy that lasted between 1075 and 1122. This controversy revolved around the question of who held the authority to appoint bishops and abbots. The Ghibelline faction believed imperial authority should control papal influence, whilst the Guelphs faction believed the Holy Roman Empire should have greater authority. But obviously there are factions within factions, and that brings into the question of the Florentine black and white Guelphs. The Black Guelphs were avid supporters of papacy, believing the church should have control over the political and social landscapes. whilst the white Guelphs, led by Dante, this chap, wanted city-states to be independent from control of the church. They believed the church should have power over Christendom matters, and the emperor should have control over civic matters. So Boniface VIII was placed in the city of Florence under the interdict, and he invited Charles, Count of Valois, to enter Italy to end the feud in 1300s between the black and white Guelphs. Charles's intervention allowed the black Guelphs to overthrow the ruling white Guelphs, i.e. Dante's party, resulting in a spree of violence and political reprisals against the former rulers. So whilst he was travelling to Rome to entreat Boniface VIII for peace, Dante was falsely accused of corruption by the black Guelphs. To make matters worse, the white Guelphs accused Dante of collaborating with the black Guelphs in an attempt to deal with the papacy. Obviously, Dante refused to admit to crimes he hadn't committed, so he was fined. But because his assets were confiscated, he wasn't able to pay the fines, and thus he was exiled from Florence. Were he ever to return, he faced being burned at the stake. These are the events the literary prophecy Ciacco tells the literary Dante. Through this prophecy, Dante narrates the pain of his own exile from Florence, whilst also hinting that the moral judgment for his exile shall fall onto Florence, the city, and the people in her, who cast him out. It is a discussion of those, the city of Florence and its people, where Dante brings in the metaphorical gluttony, the gluttony of vengeance for those who have been wronged. Florence has been torn apart by factional violence and bitter blood feuds. And the Florentine citizens before Dante's time are, Ciacco explains, the blackest souls of hell. I know, he got a little bit personal here. There is a list of Florentines who will appear throughout the different realms of hell, and they being established now by name highlights one of Dante's core arguments in the text. The factional violence he lived through is rooted in a century of wrongdoing. As such, the Florentines are in deep hell, and they'll keep appearing deeper and deeper into the realms of hell. But then Ciacco speaks for himself. Ciacco asks the poet whether or not his punishment will be greater or lesser after the Last Judgment. According to Christian theology, the human soul reaches perfection in the afterlife only after the resurrection of the body, when the body is reunited with soul at the Last Judgment. But Virgil tells him it's going to get much worse. For after the Last Judgment, those in heaven will experience more pleasure, and those in hell will experience more pain. As such, the reader is reminded that the body is an essential part of Catholic theology, as it is essential for the Last Judgment. We can only become perfect when we are reunited with our flesh, but also the experience in our bodies will multiply depending on the sins we may or may not carry in our souls. The canto ends with the pair leaving Ciacco to continue down the road, and it ends rather ominously. It ends with the line, "There we found Plutus, the great enemy." Who is Plutus, the great enemy, and what is the next circle of hell? We will find that out in the next video. I hope you enjoyed this much briefer version of the return to Dante's many circles of hell. Thank you as always for watching, and thank you to my Patreons for making this possible, and for your continued support in me pursuing the literature discussion with ancient classics and contemporary literature. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, I will see you soon for another video. Please consider liking, subscribing, or leaving a comment if you are interested. And I will see you soon for another video. And remember, books save lives. So keep reading.